The number of countries considered by South Africa to be COVID-19 high risk has been revised. Tourists from about 60 countries were originally not allowed to come to South Africa when the borders opened at the beginning of lockdown level 1. Well, the number has now been revised down to 22 countries. But the United States of America and the United Kingdom remain amongst banned countries for leisure tourism. Canada and Germany, for the first time, have been added to the red list. But there's also an exception for leisure tourists. If you have property in South Africa and you're planning a 3-month stay, you're in. Well, to tell us all about it and the reasonings behind it, I'm joined now by our Home Affairs Minister, Dr. Motsoaledi. Good evening, Dr. Motsoaledi. Thank you very much for your time. So the list is drastically reduced. Tell us why the list is so reduced when a lot of Europe is in a second wave.
Well, Sally, you may remember that. Thank you. Good evening, and good evening to the listeners and viewers out there. You may remember that when we issued the first list, we clearly said we are going to review it on a fortnightly basis, which is what we have done. Now, what the cabinet decided when they were debating how to review the list was the formula, the complicated formula, which was used for the first list. It was very complex, not easy at all, I must say. We agreed on simplifying it and use absolute numbers of countries with a certain number of infections and a certain number of deaths. And that's why the list was drastically reduced. Unfortunately, between that fortnight, countries like Spain and Germany obviously came in because their numbers kept on growing.
Yes, of course. It's a really tricky one, I think, for travellers. So let's just look at this new rule. This rule that if you're from Europe, is it only from Europe because most of the restrictions? But let's say you're from any country, but you're on the banned list, and you have property here and you're prepared to stay for 3 months. Can you come in?
That's exactly what we have said. We have, because the Minister of Tourism raised this matter and said they've got a special category of visitors, whether you call them visitors or investors or business people, but people who mostly are from Europe. Whenever Europe is in winter and South Africa is in summer, they come here and spend 3 months and more with us. And we thought we'll have to welcome such visitors. Of course, because of the economic benefits he has got, but also because we have got ample time to deal with them. If anything goes wrong with them, you can deal with the problem. Yeah. They can quarantine for 10 days, etc., because they've got a long time to be here with us. So that's why we said let's open for them. And
it says that the press release says mainly European, but it's not only European countries. If you are from the USA, for example, or that's Canada, or the UK, and you have property here, do you have to have property here, or are you just prepared to stay here for 3 months?
Well, we said mainly, meaning that then it's not exclusive to Europe, but it's mainly from European countries. I do agree that from USA and Canada, you will find such people. We said most of them do have property, but we're specifically targeting people who want to come and spend 3 months here continuously without going away, whether they've got property or not. But we know that people who do that are doing so mostly because they do have property.
I understand. So it's people who see South Africa as a second home will come and spend 3 months here. And they very likely are big spenders, because if you can spend half your life in one country and the other half of your year in another, you've probably got the means to do it. Will those people have to do a period of quarantine in South Africa in their homes when they arrive?
Well, remember that every visitor who arrives here will show us that 72-hour test. If there's nothing wrong with that test, then we won't really trouble them. But we'll advise that because they are going to spend 3 months, it's better that they self-isolate so that we don't have to follow them. But from our side and the health side, they will just get the test, and if it's positive, they come in. If it's negative, if it is positive, we'll ask them to go and self-isolate because they still have a lot of time to be here.
So am I correct that this really is targeting the very rich, the big spenders who've likely got assets here in South Africa, but the people who may have a COVID negative test but want to travel here for leisure purposes from a red country, from a banned country, they're still not allowed?
Yes, Sally, remember that the issue here is numbers. And I think people miss that. I heard people reasoning that no, the disease doesn't choose whether you are a businessman or whether you are poor or whether you are a leisure traveler. I've heard people using such reasonings. Remember, the whole issue of restriction is about reducing the probability and the possibility in terms of numbers. And we know that the number of people who just come leisurely is a huge number of people. And we might be able to, it will be very difficult to process them. Remember that when people come here, we want tests, we want to 72-hour test, we want to check this. Those who don't have tests, we are about to introduce the antigen test, which will take 15 minutes. Just imagine people having flying in for the whole night, coming in the morning, arriving at the airport and queuing there, and we must check all these things for them. They'll get very irritated if it's a large number of people.
Sure.
If it's a smaller number of maybe investors or business people, we'll be able to deal with them. So ever since the lockdown level 5, our restrictions were based on numbers.
Yeah, no, I hear the reasoning. I have to ask you, Minister, as a former health minister yourself, great concern, of course, for our health minister and his wife who've tested positive for COVID-19. I was wondering if you could just tell us how they're doing and whether there's any risk for any other members of the cabinet or the president who may have come into contact with them.
Well, I haven't been... I haven't been chosen to say that really, but both Minister Mkhize and Dr. Meima Mashiro, coincidentally, I'm sure you are aware they were my schoolmates, both of them. They were one class ahead of me at medical school. So we are friends, we know each other very well, and we wish them very well. But remember that cabinet is not easily met. You are not having cabinet meetings. I've never met Minister Mkhize for ages. But I've spoken to him. For instance, this list you are talking about there was the movement to change that list was led, as the statement is saying, by myself, Minister Mkhize and Minister Gubayi Ngubane. But we never met. So there are very few people in cabinet who ever meet, but we discuss every day through this mode as I'm doing with you now.
All right. No, I appreciate that. And you say they're both doing okay at this point, health-wise?
Well, as far as I know, I never spoke to them today. I never checked today, but yesterday we know they were doing very well.
All right, that's really good to hear. Thank you so much for your time this evening. That is our Home Affairs Minister, Dr. Aaron Motsoaledi.